Now that the world has actually lived through a really significant global virus outbreak in the age of mass media, it's given everyone pause for thought and time to reflect on movies, TV shows and video games about virus outbreaks. Pandemic fiction is usually either a horror or an action thriller. There's a virus and it's always lethal to pretty much everyone. If you get it, that's either it for you, or it turns you into a monster zombie demon thing that lusts for flesh. And it almost always totals the population and completely destroys society. It's usually like this because that's the most obvious route to creating high-stakes tension for your story to work. In a piece of fiction, we can't have it be a case of, well, if you get the virus, you might die, you might not, you might just get the sniffles for a week, no one can say for certain, and then we're just going to ditch all the precautionary measures because we got bored. And also the economy. Oh my god, will someone please think of the economy? Oh my god, money is not circulating anymore. Oh my god, this is the most terrible thing that's ever happened. There are other routes to creating an emotional hook, of course, like in this Spanish movie from 2019 called Infection, which as far as I can tell was the last virus movie released before COVID happened. It's about a guy trying to save his son from a disease that turns people into ravenous zombies. So, you know, father protects crotch spawn, that's some kind of stakes for you. But the thing is, it's still a bit too exciting, considering what the COVID pandemic has actually been like for most people. For most of us, outside of emergency workers who probably got the full horror thriller pandemic experience, COVID has either been boring and annoying or sad and desolate. And the only piece of media I've seen that even comes close to capturing that experience is the 2015-18 comedy drama series The Last Man on Earth. While yes, like most pandemic media, The Last Man on Earth has high stakes and almost everyone dies, and it does take the world it's built for itself seriously, in terms of tone, I would call it the most honest piece of fiction about a pandemic. The premise is truly genius. Will Forte stars as Phil Miller, seemingly the only survivor of a global virus outbreak that's killed every single person on the planet. But far from being a skilled and adaptive survivor, he just got lucky. Phil is a schlubby fuck-up who spends his days relieving his boredom by doing things that would have been socially unacceptable when people were around. Like playing bowling with cars, putting paint cans in a wood chipper, filling a paddling pool with margaritas and bathing in it. Yes, alright, this might not exactly be the height of realism as I'm trying to sell this show as, but I see this as the higher scale equivalent of that period where everyone was making sourdough. We were all just trying to find anything to get through the day with your sanity more or less intact. When you've lost the original purpose in your life and the days are never ending and ultimately just pointless, you're left trying to find anything to do, and I personally find this a much more human and relatable experience than, say, The Last of Us. This is not to totally dunk on The Last of Us, of course. I love The Last of Us, it's incredibly fun. But given what COVID was actually like for most people, the question that I now have for every piece of virus outbreak media is, why is it that when society starts to break down, the answer to all of our problems is just to start killing each other for no reason? Like, I know it's a video game, and in video games the mechanics are pretty much always kill the baddies, but it's a series of post-apocalyptic games where pretty much the main thing you do is sneak up on people and shove a knife in their throats, infected or not. Just they are bad because of a reason, and they want to shoot you with their guns, so therefore you need to kill them, because everyone hates each other because the world's gone to fuck. Like, this guy that I'm killing here right now on screen, like, sure he's got a gun and he's part of a bad gang of people who want to kill me, but what was the first thing that this guy specifically did on Outbreak Day when the mutant fungus thing first happened? Did he stay locked in his home for weeks on end making sourdough? How did that lead to him deciding to go around shooting people? Like, I'm sure this guy's got thoughts, feelings, family and a backstory that goes beyond world fucked, people bad now. Of course, Phil Miller isn't the only person left on the planet. More people start showing up eventually, and I love that when our characters in The Last Man on Earth run into new people, instead of just shooting each other because it's the end of the world and everything's fucked so why not, the first question they ask each other is, are you nice? That may sound stupid, yes, but it's much more human and relatable to me than just blanketly assuming another person's your enemy because of the bleakness of your surroundings. They do kill people occasionally, of course. A lot of the time as a joke, they'll have a big-name guest show up as a survivor and then kill them off pretty much immediately. But a single death is treated as a big deal in this show, and it has huge knock-on effects for the episodes that follow. The entire arc of one of our characters in Season 3 is built on one of these random killings. And this is much more believable to me because, yeah, alright, there's been a virus that's caused devastation and death on a massive scale, but if you construct a world where pretty much any further death is meaningless, the only way to artificially raise your stakes from there is to say, have your character stab a pregnant lady. Which is worse than all of the other deaths that Ellie is responsible for because, oh my god, baby. Like, one of the guys that Ellie mercilessly stabbed to death a stage or two before this, he could have probably done a spunk that created another baby. But no, he doesn't matter as much as the pregnant lady for some reason. He's just another body on top of the pile of corpses that Ellie's responsible for. When watched pre-pandemic, The Last Man on Earth did come under criticism for being unrealistic, because for one thing, yeah alright, no one exactly seems all that traumatised by the mass-scale death that just went on a couple of years previously. Although this has been proven completely accurate now that everyone's just gone back to their lives, in spite of the fact that COVID hasn't exactly gone anywhere. And another point of criticism was that for the first season at least, survival in this new world where almost everyone is dead is almost a secondary concern for the show. It comes up with all these ludicrous answers to all of the natural questions that would come up when trying to make this world seem believable. So there are no sewage workers anymore, no running water, so where does Phil do his business? Well, he uses a swimming pool as a toilet. What do they do about food? Live off of expiring canned goods. Electricity? Just some throwaway line about generators. When a guy shows up who seems to actually know what he's doing when it comes to survival, he's interested in farming and actually getting society back up and running, but Phil takes issue with him because he just happens to have the exact same name as him, and so everyone starts calling Phil by his middle name, Tandy. And so the whole social dynamic turns into an egotistical dick measuring contest between the two Phil Millers, rather than a tale of survival. Season 1 is essentially like a very weird version of Peep Show. It presents awkward and uncomfortable relationship-based comedy in a bizarre context. And that's why I found it such a fascinating watch now that COVID's happened, because this is exactly the lesson that COVID taught us. The context changed, but people ultimately didn't. There may have been a deadly virus around, but people were still annoying, they still fucked up, they were still selfish. We still experience boredom, jealousy, greed, lust, all of the things that humans usually experience. Like, some of the biggest news stories of the pandemic were about political and scientific figures seeing people that they were having affairs with and breaking public health guidelines. Outside of the emergency rooms, across the world, for most people, COVID was a mundane experience transplanted into an extreme situation, where they were wandering around corner shops looking for the last can of chopped tomatoes and wondering if they'd ever have sex again. And The Last Man on Earth captures that experience with stunning accuracy. Had more people survived the virus in this world, it would basically be a documentary. The flashback episode in Season 3 where we see what went on when the virus first hit is extremely spooky given what we all actually went through. Even more so when you remember that this is set in the year 2020. Like, people call The Simpsons the show that predicts things, but this is just uncanny, right? I love that The Last Man on Earth doesn't approach its world making assumptions about the sort of story you're expected to tell when given this pitch. The show looks at a list of scenarios that typically come up when given the word post-apocalyptic, and it subverts them. What if there's only 2 people left on the planet and they want to repopulate society, but those 2 people hate each other? What if one of the few people to survive the apocalypse was a cannibalistic serial killer? This is not to say, of course, that there aren't more serious moments and that survival isn't considered an important topic for the show. It keeps the focus on relationship-based comedy beyond Season 1 because, yeah, alright, everyone's dead, but people are still people. But the show becomes much more fun in Season 2 when Tandy learns to become less of a destructive monster and more just the source of levity in an extreme situation for a group trying to forge a new life for themselves in a dead world. The lack of diverse skills in a group of largely useless suburban survivors is highlighted in situations, for example, where someone has a burst appendix and needs an operation, but the only person in this group who's good with their hands was a professional chef and cannot handle something like this at all. Carol and Erica get pregnant and want to raise children in this new world, but again, there's no doctors, so who's going to deliver the baby? And of course at the end of Season 3 we have the incredibly serious issue of the country being covered in unmanned nuclear power plants. So you see, it does take the world seriously, and it's not like it forgets that there's been a deadly virus that's caused the complete collapse of civilization. But the fact it's cast in its main roles Will Forte and Kristen Schaal, who I swear has been in every show I like at least once, means that we've got a show about a serious and downcast subject, told with a sense of levity, and that's usually missing from post-apocalyptic fiction. And that's what makes it feel more real to me, because a bleak tone doesn't inherently make a story feel more human. Coming at such a serious subject with a light-hearted tone means that The Last Man on Earth comes away from this post-COVID re-evaluation of end-of-the-world fiction with much more authenticity to me. Because we didn't all turn into grizzled gnarled badasses, patrolling ruined cities with shotguns and shoving knives in each other's throats just because a virus happened. Some of us were just schlubby fuck-ups like Tandy. To me, this show is an honest depiction of how most people would adapt in an extreme situation. COVID may not have gone as far as the virus in this world did, but let's face it, the pandemic was much less like this and more like this.